In less than a month, Australia will run out of gasoline because the reality is this. Australia currently only has 26 days worth of diesel reserves and 29 days worth of gasoline reserves. And believe it or not, there are only 2 oil refineries in the entire country, one in Geelong, Victoria, and the other in Brisbane. But the most critical issue is that these 2 refineries can only supply 20% of Australia's total demand for refined oil products. Refined oil products are the gasoline you can put directly into your car. The remaining 80% relies entirely on imports from overseas. There's also a paradox here. To produce refined oil products, you need crude oil, but right now crude oil also can't get into Australia. Australia is currently facing a vicious cycle of collapse. International standards require Australia to have more than 90 days of oil reserves, but since 2012, Australia has never met this standard. So when you see those white people in the news, right, they're bringing cans to the gas station to fill up a few litres of fuel. Do you still think they're foolish? Actually, they're very smart. They're locals. They know exactly what's going on here, and now global inflation is about to reach a new peak. Why? Because now, whether it's the raw material for making polyethylene plastic for food packaging, or building materials like doors and windows, or even the shipping costs to bring goods into Australia, these have all accounted for 20% just in the month of March. But has your salary changed? And some countries or regions might even face economic collapse. Also, don't naively think that switching to electric cars will solve the oil problem. Let me tell you this. Electricity prices in Australia are also on the verge of collapse, especially in these 2 cities. What many people don't know is that in Australia, the cities of Perth and Darwin rely heavily on natural gas for power generation. In fact, about 50% in one city and 80% in the other are entirely dependent on natural gas. The Western Australian government is relatively protective of Perth and has already implemented strict natural gas reservation policies. They mandate that 15% of locally produced natural gas must be reserved for Perth and cannot be exported, but this also means that the remaining 85% can still be exported. As for capital, you know how it is. If I sell abroad, I can get a higher price. Why would I want to reserve it for Australians? That's just wishful thinking, right? As a result, electricity prices have soared, and I even think there's a possibility of blackouts in Perth, so if you're still considering investing in these places now, you really need to be careful. Also, let me mention one more thing. The only places in all of Australia with US military bases are these 2 cities, Darwin and Perth. I'm not saying Iran will attack, but if the conflict escalates further, if things escalate again, if Australia gets drawn into this conflict, these 2 places will definitely be the first to be affected, especially Perth, which also has a US nuclear base. Then, take a look at what Li Ka-shing has done. He cashed out all his assets in the UK, and if you recall, after he sold off his assets in Hong Kong and mainland China, what happened to property prices in those 2 cities? Right? He is definitely ahead of ordinary people like us. The good news is that Li Ka-shing has never sold his assets in Australia. His investments are also in the electricity and gas sectors. So what do you think will happen to Australian property prices next? Although Australia will still experience severe inflation, if you are a landlord today and you have, then you don't need to panic about this, because once severe inflation happens and as it gradually unfolds, your rental income and land value will definitely